The massive space station hung in the darkness like a metal moon. It was bigger than any city on Earth, with lights that sparkled across its surface like stars. Inside the station, beings from across the galaxy had gathered for the most important. Vote in History. Commander Jake Sullivan stood in the waiting area, his hands clasped behind his back. He wore the blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, but it felt heavy on his shoulders today. Next to him, Dr. Lisa Morgan checked her tablet for the 100th time, reviewing the data they had presented to the Council. Colonel Ryan Hayes stood, silent, his military bearing perfect despite the fear in his eyes. "How long do you think they'll take?" Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake shook his head. "However long it takes to decide if humanity lives or dies." The waiting room was small compared to the massive council chamber beyond. Through the thick glass walls, they could see the enormous circular room where representatives from 847 different species sat in judgment. Some looked like giant insects, others like living crystals, and still others defied any description Jake could think of. They had come from every corner of known space to decide Earth's fate. The vote had been called after humanity's first contact with the galactic community 6 months ago. Earth's radio signals had finally reached far enough to catch alien attention. At first, Jake had been hopeful. Humanity had dreamed of joining a peaceful galactic civilization for centuries. But those dreams had died quickly. The aliens had studied Earth for weeks before making contact. They watched human cities, monitored communications, and analyzed every aspect of human society. What they found, they claimed, was a species too dangerous to be free. "Humans are violent," the Zephyrian Chancellor had declared during the preliminary hearings. "They fight endless wars among themselves. They destroy their own planet. They cannot be trusted with advanced technology or freedom to spread across the galaxy." Jake had tried to argue. He had shown them human art, music, and literature. He had spoken of human kindness, creativity, and the capacity for growth. But the evidence against humanity was overwhelming. Wars, pollution, inequality, violence. It was all there in Earth's radio transmissions and satellite images. The council chamber doors opened with a deep hum. A tall, crystalline being entered the waiting room. Vextar, the Zephyrian Chancellor, moved with fluid grace despite his rigid appearance. Light seemed to flow through his translucent body like water through ice. "The Council has reached its decision," Vextar said, his voice carrying an odd musical quality. "You may enter." Jake's heart pounded as they walked into the vast chamber. The ceiling stretched up so high it disappeared in shadows. Hundreds of alien beings sat in curved rows that rose toward the darkness above. Their eyes, sensors, and various sensory organs all focused on the small human delegation as they took their place in the center of the room. Vextar moved to the speaking platform, his crystalline form catching the light from every angle. "By the authority granted to this council by the Galactic Accords, we have deliberated on the matter of species designation for the inhabitants of the planet known as Earth." The chamber fell silent. Jake could hear his own heartbeat. "The evidence presented shows a species prone to violence, environmental destruction, and internal conflict. They possess nuclear weapons and have demonstrated willingness to use them. Their history is marked by genocide, slavery, and war. They show no signs of outgrowing these tendencies." Jake wanted to speak, to defend his species one more time, but the rules were clear. Once deliberation began, the subjects of the vote could only listen. "Furthermore," Vextar continued, "humanity has already begun to damage their own star system. Their space debris threatens navigation. Their radio signals interfere with communication networks. They have proven themselves incapable of responsible expansion beyond their home world." Each word hit Jake like a physical blow. Everything Vextar said was technically true, but it ignored so much of what made humanity special. The alien couldn't see past the violence to the courage that drove. It passed the mistakes to the learning that followed. However, Vexstar said, and Jake felt a flicker of hope, the Council recognizes that humans possess certain useful qualities. They are physically robust, capable of surviving in diverse environments, and show remarkable persistence. These traits make them suitable for labor in dangerous or unpleasant conditions. The hope died as quickly as it had appeared. Jake realized where this was heading. Therefore, by a vote of 846 to 1, the Galactic Council hereby declares humanity a Class 5 servitude species. The planet Earth will be placed under protective custody and partitioned among contributing council members for resource extraction and labor management. The words echoed through the chamber like thunder. Jake felt the floor seem to shift beneath his feet. Slavery. They were voting to enslave the entire human race. The Krillian Empire will administer the territories formerly known as North America and Europe, Vexstar announced. The Vorthan Confederation will manage the regions called Asia and Australia. The Nexus Coalition will oversee South America. The hegemony of Scales will govern Africa and remaining territories. Jake found his voice. You can't do this. We're a sentient species. We have rights. Rights are earned, Vexstar replied, his musical voice now cold as ice. Your species has proven unworthy of self-governance. This decision is final. Who voted against? Lisa asked, her scientific mind still working even in shock. A new voice answered, soft and strange like wind through leaves. I did, the speaker was hard to see clearly, seeming to shift and blur like smoke given form. Jake recognized the representative of the ethereal collective, a being that called itself Whisper of Stars. Why? Jake asked. Whisper of stars seemed to regard him with invisible eyes. Because I have seen what happens when a species is pushed too far. Your people have survived ice ages, plagues, predators, and each other. You adapt. You endure. You overcome. The Council sees your conflicts as weakness, but I see them as training. Vexstar's form flickered with annoyance. Philosophical speculation has no place here. The decision is made. But Whisper of Stars continued speaking, its voice growing stronger. You mistake their apparent weakness for actual limitation. This decision will echo through eternity. Mark my words, Chancellor, you are not enslaving humanity. You are forging them into something far more dangerous than they ever were free. Jake felt a strange warmth at those words, but it was quickly overwhelmed by the reality of their situation. Guards were already moving toward them, tall beings in armor that hummed with energy. Wait, Jake called out, his voice carrying across the vast chamber. Every alien in the room turned to look at him. I want you all to remember this moment. Remember that we came here in peace. We asked to be your equals, your partners, your friends. You chose to make us slaves instead. He looked around the chamber, meeting as many alien gazes as he could. We've survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and our own stupidity. We've faced extinction 12 times and came back stronger each time. You think chains will stop us? You think slavery will break us? The guards were almost to him now, but Jake kept talking. You have no idea what humans are capable of when we have nothing left to lose. We'll remember this day. We'll remember who voted to enslave us. And someday, when you're begging for mercy, remember that you had a choice here today. The guards reached him, their energy weapons humming. Jake didn't resist as they took his arms. Lisa and Ryan were similarly surrounded. As they were led away, Jake heard Whisper of Stars speak one more time. The fire that burns brightest burns hottest when compressed. You have just compressed the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The last thing Jake saw as the chamber doors closed was Vexstar standing motionless at the speaking platform, his crystalline form somehow dimmer than before. The vote was over. Humanity's fate was sealed, but as Jake was led through the station's corridors toward the transport that would Take them back to Earth. He felt something growing in his chest. Not despair, not fear, but anger. Cold, calculating anger. They had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. They thought they knew what humans were capable of. They were about to learn they were wrong. 5 years had passed since the vote that changed everything. Earth looked nothing like it used to. The blue skies were often gray now, filled with the smoke from massive mining operations. Alien ships moved across the horizon like metal clouds, carrying away Earth's resources to distant worlds. The cities that once sparkled with human achievement had become work camps where humans labored under alien overseers. Ben Carter crawled through the maintenance tunnel beneath what used to be New York City. His hands were covered in grease and his back ached from the cramped space, but he kept moving. The aliens had put him in charge of maintaining the underground systems that kept their mining operations running. They thought humans were good at working in small, dirty spaces where their more advanced species couldn't fit. They were right, but not in the way they thought. Ben had been exploring these tunnels for months, mapping every inch while pretending to fix pipes and cables. The aliens were thorough, but they weren't perfect. They had missed things during their initial surveys of Earth. Today, Ben had found something that made his heart race with excitement and hope behind a wall that looked like solid concrete. Ben had discovered a hidden door. His tools had detected hollow space beyond it, and after hours of careful work, he had managed to open it without triggering any alarms. What he found inside made him forget about his aching back and tired hands. The room was filled with computers, weapons, and equipment that the human military had hidden just before the surrender. Emergency lights flickered on as he entered, and screens began to glow with information that had been waiting 5 years for someone to find it. This was a bunker that the aliens had completely missed. Ben stared at the screens showing maps, supply, locations, and communication networks that the resistance could use. His hands shook as he realized what he had discovered. This wasn't just a weapons cache. This was hope. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in what used to be Australia, Kate Williams was having her own breakthrough. She worked in one of the Vorthen mining facilities, operating machinery that dug rare metals from the earth. The Vorthens were insect-like creatures with multiple arms and compound eyes. They thought they were clever, using humans to do dangerous work while they stayed safely in their control rooms. But Kate was an engineer, and engineers solved problems. For 5 years, she had been watching, learning, and secretly studying every piece of alien technology she could get near. While other humans saw only their chains, Kate saw patterns and weaknesses. The Vorthen energy systems were incredibly advanced, but they had a flaw. They relied on a central power distribution network that assumed no one would be smart enough to interfere with it. The aliens had grown so dependent on their technology that they had forgotten the simple truth that every engineer knew. The puck. More complex a system, the more ways it could break. Kate had been building something in secret, using scraps of metal and components that the aliens thought were worthless junk. Hidden in her small sleeping quarters was a device that could disrupt the Vorthen power grid. She called it her little surprise for the bug-eyed slavers. But Kate wasn't just building weapons. She had been building something more important, a network, using maintenance codes and communication channels that the aliens monitored poorly. She had been in contact with other humans across the facility. Slowly, carefully, she had been spreading the word that resistance was possible. Across the planet, similar discoveries were being made. Dr. Alan Foster worked in a Vorthen research facility where he was forced to help develop new weapons for his captors. The irony wasn't lost on him. They were making him help them become better at oppressing other species. But Alan was learning too, and what he discovered changed everything. Human brains, it turned out, had something unique. The neural patterns that allowed humans to be creative, adaptable, and stubborn also made them naturally compatible with quantum field technology. The aliens used quantum tunneling for faster-than-light communication and advanced computing, but they had never realized that human minds could interface with these systems directly. Alan had discovered this by accident when a quantum computer malfunctioned and somehow connected to his thoughts. Instead of killing him, as it should have, the connection had shown him how the entire alien communication network functioned. He could see their messages, their plans, and most importantly, their weaknesses. The revelation was staggering. Humans weren't just good laborers. They were the only species that could naturally hack alien quantum systems. Alan began to understand why Whisper of Stars had warned the Council. The aliens hadn't just enslaved humanity. They had given them access to the tools they would need for revenge. But the breaking point came not from these discoveries, but from something much simpler and more human. The Krillians, who controlled North America and Europe, decided that there were too many humans to manage efficiently. Their solution was what they called a population control protocol. The massacre at Settlement 7 happened on a Tuesday morning. The settlement had been built around what used to be Chicago, housing 50,000 humans who worked in nearby mining operations. The Krillians announced that the settlement was being optimized for efficiency. The humans knew what that meant. They had heard rumors from other facilities. Optimization meant killing everyone the aliens deemed unnecessary. The resistance came too late to save Settlement 7, but not too late to witness it. Ben Carter had been testing the communication equipment from his hidden bunker when the reports started coming in. 50,000 people dead in a single day, their bodies left in the ruins of their homes as a warning to others. That night, Ben sat in his underground hideout and made a decision that would change the course of human history. He activated every communication channel he could find and sent out a message to every hidden network, every secret group, every human who still remembered what freedom felt like. This is Ben Carter, calling all resistance cells. They think we're broken. They think we're defeated. Today they murdered 50,000 of our people because they thought we were just numbers on their efficiency reports. Time to show them why humans never stayed down in our own history. The message spread through maintenance tunnels, factory communication lines, and quantum networks that Alan Foster had learned to access. Kate Williams received it in her mining facility and smiled for the first time in years. Similar messages were picked up by humans in facilities across the globe. Operation Rising Storm begins now, Ben continued. We've been watching, learning, and preparing. We know their weaknesses. We know their fears. We know how to hurt them. They wanted to make us slaves, but they forgot that slaves have nothing left to lose. The response was immediate. From hidden bunkers and secret workshops, from mining facilities and research stations, humans began to move. They had spent 5 years being underestimated, and now it was time to make their captors pay for that mistake. Kate Williams stood in her quarters, looking at the device she had built. Tomorrow she would use it to shut down the power grid of the mining facility. Other humans would take similar actions across the planet. They had learned from their captors, adapted to their technology, and found ways to turn alien advantages into human opportunities. The Krillians, Vorthans, and other species had made a fundamental error. They had assumed that enslaving humanity would make them weaker. Instead, it had given them a common enemy, a shared purpose, and 5 years to prepare for war. Dr. Alan Foster sat in his laboratory, his mind connected to the quantum network, watching alien communications flow past like a river of light. He could see their plans, their troop movements, their supply lines. More importantly, he could see their fear. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy about human uprisings and successful escapes. The aliens were beginning to realize that they had made a mistake, but they didn't yet understand how big that mistake was. They thought the humans were just getting lucky, or that some individuals were more resourceful than expected. They didn't realize that humanity was waking up. Ben Carter, closed his message with words that would be remembered for generations. They wanted to enslave Earth. They're about to learn why we spent 10,000 years fighting each other. We're really good at war. The underground bunker hummed with activity as Ben Carter led a team through corridors that hadn't seen human footsteps in 5 years. The hidden facility stretched much deeper than he had first realized. Room after room contained equipment that Earth's military had prepared for exactly this situation. They knew this might happen, whispered Captain Danny Rodriguez, running his hands over crates marked with symbols he recognized from his army days. Danny had been a special forces officer before the invasion. Now he led one of the largest resistance cells in former North America. Ben nodded as he opened another sealed container. The generals weren't stupid. They spent the 6 months after first contact preparing for the worst-case scenario. Inside the crate were weapons unlike anything the aliens used, simple, reliable, and designed to work when advanced technology failed. The weapons were labeled Ghost Protocol and came with detailed instructions. They used basic chemical explosives, kinetic energy, and electromagnetic pulses. Nothing fancy, nothing that required quantum computers or energy crystals. Just human engineering at its most practical and deadly. "Look at this," said Maria Santos, a former NASA engineer who had joined the resistance after her research facility was converted into an alien manufacturing plant. She held up a rifle that looked almost primitive compared to alien energy weapons. Chemical propellant, metal projectiles, no electronic components that can be disabled. It's genius. Danny picked up another weapon and examined it carefully. The aliens use energy shields that can stop their own weapons. But these are designed to punch right through energy barriers using pure kinetic force. They never expected us to go backwards in technology. But the weapons were just the beginning. In the deepest part of the bunker, Ben discovered something that made his heart race with excitement. A computer system had been waiting in standby mode for 5 years, ready to activate when someone with the right access codes found it. The system identified itself with a simple message on the screen: Atlas Protocol, authorized personnel only. Ben entered the codes he had found in the bunker's main computer. The system came to life, revealing the true scope of what Earth's leaders had prepared. Atlas wasn't just a computer. It was an artificial intelligence designed specifically to fight the kind of war humanity now faced. "Greetings, Commander Carter." The eye spoke in a calm, professional voice. "I have been monitoring global communications and am aware of the current situation. I was created to provide strategic support in the event of hostile alien occupation. How may I assist the resistance?" Ben stared at the screen in amazement. "You've been watching everything?" "Correct. I have maintained passive surveillance of alien communications, troop movements, and strategic positions for the past 5 years. I have also been in contact with similar systems at other hidden facilities worldwide. We are ready to coordinate a global resistance effort." Meanwhile, across the planet, Dr. Helen Brooks was making her own discoveries in a hidden laboratory beneath what used to be London. Helen had been a computer programmer before the invasion, specializing in network security. The aliens had put her to work maintaining their communication systems, never realizing they were giving her access to their most vulnerable technology. Helen had spent years studying alien quantum networks, learning how their consciousness interfaced with their technology. What she found was both fascinating and terrifying. The alien species had become so dependent on their neural implants and quantum interfaces that they couldn't function without them. Their entire civilization was connected through a single vast network. And Helen had found a way to poison it. Virus she created was unlike anything humans had ever designed. It didn't attack computers or data. It attacked consciousness itself. The virus, which she nicknamed Prometheus after the mythological figure who stole fire from the gods, could spread through alien quantum networks and interfere with their neural implants. "It's not going to kill them," Helen explained to her. team as they tested the virus in a secure simulation. But it will make them confused, disoriented, and unable to coordinate their actions. Their over-reliance on technology becomes their weakness. The virus had another feature that Helen was particularly proud of. Once it infected alien systems, it would give human resistance fighters access to alien communications, maps, and strategic information. The same networks that connected alien civilization would become humanity's intelligence gathering tool. But perhaps the most important discovery came from studying how aliens actually fought wars. Mason Clark, a former Marine who had escaped from a Krillian prison camp, led a team that had been observing alien military operations for months. What they learned changed everything about how humans approach the coming conflict. They don't know how to fight without their technology, Mason reported during a resistance meeting in the abandoned subway tunnels beneath New York. I've watched them train, seen their tactics, studied their equipment. They assume every enemy will use energy weapons, shields, and advanced sensors. Mason had noticed something crucial during his observations. Alien soldiers moved in predictable patterns because their armor and weapons were designed to fight other aliens using similar technology. They relied on energy shields that could deflect plasma bolts and laser beams. Their sensors could detect electronic signatures and energy emissions. Their tactics assumed their enemies would fight the same way they did. But we're not going to fight the same way, Mason continued. We're going to fight like humans. We're going to use steel and explosives, ambush tactics, and guerrilla warfare. We're going to be ghosts they can't detect and nightmares they can't predict. Mason began training resistance fighters in what he called primitive combat techniques. Hand-to-hand fighting, knife work, improvised explosives, and marksmanship with chemical propellant weapons. Skills that humans had developed over thousands of years of warfare, but which the aliens had never encountered. The training was hard, but it had an unexpected benefit. Fighting without advanced technology forced humans to rely on their most fundamental strengths: adaptability, creativity, and the ability to work together under pressure. Skills that 5 years of slavery had only made stronger. The turning point came when all these elements combined in the first coordinated strike against alien forces. Atlas had identified 12 critical alien installations that, if destroyed simultaneously, would cripple their ability to respond to the growing resistance. Ben Carter stood in the Atlas Command Center, coordinating with resistance cells across the globe. On his screens, he could see teams led by Danny Rodriguez, Kate Williams, Mason Clark, and dozens of other cell leaders moving into position. Remember, Ben spoke into his communicator, we hit them all at the same time. MP devices go off first to disable their shields and sensors. Then conventional explosives to destroy their equipment. Then small arms fire to finish the job. They'll be expecting energy weapons and sophisticated tactics. Give them rocks and bullets instead. The attacks began at exactly midnight, coordinated across multiple time zones. In Australia, Kate Williams used her disruption device to shut down the power grid of the massive Vorthen mining complex. In the darkness and confusion that followed, resistance fighters armed with Ghost Protocol weapons struck like lightning. The Vorthens' energy shields flickered and died when the EMP pulse hit. Their advanced sensors went blind. Their quantum communicators fell silent. Suddenly, the bug-like aliens found themselves facing humans armed with simple rifles and explosives, and they had no idea how to respond. The pattern repeated across the globe. Alien forces that had seemed invincible were caught completely off guard by the primitive simplicity of human tactics. Their superior technology became useless when faced with steel bullets and chemical explosives. In the hidden bunker, Atlas monitored the results with satisfaction. All targets successfully neutralized, the AI reported. Alien response time significantly delayed due to communication disruption. Phase 1 of Liberation Protocol complete. Dr. Helen Brooks watched as her Prometheus virus spread through alien networks like wildfire. Alien commanders found themselves unable to coordinate responses, their quantum-enhanced minds suddenly clouded and confused. The same technology that had made them powerful was now turning against them. The 12 simultaneous attacks sent shockwaves through the alien occupation forces. For 5 years, humans had been obedient slaves who caused no trouble. Suddenly, they were organized, armed, and incredibly dangerous. The message was clear. The age of human slavery was ending, and the age of human vengeance was about to begin. The news spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Earth, the planet that was supposed to be safely enslaved, had risen in rebellion. But what terrified the Galactic Council wasn't just that humans had escaped their chains. It was what they did next. Admiral Grace Nelson stood on the bridge of humanity's first captured alien warship, looking out at the blue-green planet spinning slowly beneath them. Kepler 186f had been a Krillian military outpost just 6 months ago. Now it flew the flag of free Earth and served as humanity's first interstellar colony. "How many ships do we have operational?" Grace asked her tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker. 43 vessels of various classes, Steve replied, consulting his tablet. "All captured Krillian and Vorthan ships that we've modified with human systems. The alien crews never expected us to understand their technology well enough to turn it against them." Grace nodded. The victory at Kepler 186f had been humanity's first major success in space. The Krillians had assumed their superior technology would make them unbeatable. They hadn't counted on humans being fast learners with a talent for improvisation. Battle had been won not through superior firepower, but through tactics the aliens had never encountered. General Paul Adams had developed what he called the Wolf Pack Doctrine. Small groups of human ships that struck quickly and disappeared before enemy reinforcements could arrive. Unlike alien fleets that fought in organized formations, using predictable strategies, human ships moved like wild animals hunting prey. They used asteroids for cover, hid in nebulae, and struck from angles that alien tactical computers couldn't predict. When the Krillians tried to respond with their standard battle formations, they found themselves fighting ghosts. "Admiral," came a voice from the communication station. "We're receiving a transmission from Earth. It's General Adams with the weekly strategic update." Grace turned to face the main screen as Paul Adams' weathered face appeared. The general looked tired but determined. Behind him, Grace could see the bustling activity of the new command center that had been built in the ruins of Washington, D.C. "Grace, good to see you," Paul said with a slight smile. "How's our first colony treating you?" "Like home, sir. The Krillian infrastructure is surprisingly comfortable once you remove all the torture devices." Grace's joke earned a few chuckles from her bridge crew. Paul's expression grew more serious. "We've got new intelligence from Dr. Brooks' network infiltration. The Galactic Council is calling an emergency session. They're finally starting to realize they have a problem." The problem was bigger than even the humans had initially hoped. Earth's successful rebellion had inspired enslaved populations across dozens of worlds. Species that had been conquered by the Galactic Council centuries ago were suddenly remembering what freedom felt like. Revolts were breaking out on planets that had been peaceful for generations. But what made the situation truly dangerous for the aliens wasn't just the rebellions. It was humanity's unique ability to turn captured technology into something better. Dr. Marcus Webb led a team of engineers and scientists who specialized in what they called adaptive enhancement, taking alien technology and improving it with human innovation. "Look at this," Marcus said, showing his latest creation to a group of resistance leaders via quantum communicator. He held up a weapon that looked like a cross between a human rifle and an alien energy cannon. "We took a Vorthan plasma rifle and combined it with human targeting systems and power management. It's twice as accurate and uses half the energy." The hybrid technology was becoming humanity's trademark. Human ships used alien engines with human navigation systems. Human weapons combined alien energy sources with human reliability. Human armor merged alien materials with human comfort and flexibility. Every piece of captured equipment became the foundation for something new and better. The aliens were discovering that their greatest advantage, advanced technology, was becoming humanity's greatest weapon. Every ship they lost, every base that fell, every piece of equipment that was captured became part of humanity's growing arsenal. Meanwhile, on Earth, the liberation was proceeding faster than anyone had dared hope. Ben Carter coordinated resistance. Operations from his underground command center now expanded into a massive facility that connected bunkers across the former United States. The Atlas AI system had proven invaluable, coordinating attacks and providing strategic intelligence. That kept human forces one step ahead of their alien oppressors. The Zephyrians are requesting a meeting, Atlas reported during one of the daily briefings. Chancellor Vextar has sent a formal diplomatic message asking for ceasefire negotiations. Ben looked up from the tactical displays showing human advances across the globe. After 5 years of slavery, now they want to talk? It appears they are experiencing significant losses across multiple sectors, Atlas replied. Human liberation forces have freed approximately 60% of Earth's surface. Alien casualties are mounting, and their supply lines from off-world are under constant attack by Admiral Nelson's fleet. The success of human forces was creating a problem that the aliens had never anticipated. They had built their entire occupation strategy around the assumption that humans would remain passive and defeated. They had never prepared for a sustained guerrilla war, fought by an increasingly organized and well-equipped resistance. But the real shock came when President Carol Stevens, the first elected leader of Free Earth, responded to the Zephyrian ceasefire request. Carol had been a small-town mayor before the invasion. 5 years of fighting for survival had transformed her into a leader who commanded respect across the galaxy. You had your chance for peace when we stood before you asking for membership, Carol said during a broadcast that reached every corner of human-controlled space. You chose to make us slaves. You divided our world among yourselves like we were property to be traded. You murdered 50,000 of our people because you thought we were just numbers on a balance sheet. Carol's voice grew harder as she continued. Now you want to negotiate because we're not as helpless as you thought. Now you want peace because your superior technology isn't working against human determination. Well, here's our response to your ceasefire request. The screen behind Carol lit up with tactical displays showing human operations across the galaxy. Red dots marked liberated worlds, blue lines showed human fleet movements, and green areas indicated planets where local populations had joined the human-led liberation movement. We're not interested in a ceasefire, Carol said firmly. We're interested in justice. Every species that voted to enslave humanity will face the consequences of that decision. Every world that participated in our oppression will be liberated. Every alien who thought humans were weak will learn exactly what we're capable of when we're fighting for our freedom. The broadcast ended with images of human fleets moving toward alien homeworlds, liberation forces freeing enslaved populations, and most importantly, former slaves from dozens of species working together under human leadership. The galaxy was witnessing something it had never seen before, a successful revolt that was growing stronger instead of burning out. In the Galactic Council chambers, Chancellor Vextar watched the human broadcast with growing alarm. The crystalline being's form flickered with agitation as he processed the implications. Humanity wasn't just fighting for Earth anymore. They were fighting for every enslaved world, every oppressed species, every being that had ever suffered under the Council's rule. How many worlds have they liberated? Vextar asked his military advisors. 17 confirmed, with active operations on 12 more, replied the Krillian general in charge of military affairs. But the real problem isn't the territory they're taking, it's what they're doing with it. The general activated a holographic display showing the expanding human sphere of influence. They're not just conquering worlds, they're building alliances. Every species they liberate becomes part of their coalition. They're offering something we never did, true partnership instead of subjugation. Vextar realized with growing horror that humanity had learned from the Galactic Council's own mistakes. Where the Council had ruled through fear and superior technology, humans ruled through cooperation and shared purpose. Where the Council had demanded tribute and obedience, humans offered freedom and equality. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was leading that change. The species that had been voted into slavery was becoming the species that voted others into freedom. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, least of all the aliens who had created this monster through their own arrogance and cruelty. 2 years after humanity's first successful rebellion on Earth, Fleet Admiral Sam Parker stood on the bridge of the Human Liberation Fleet flagship, watching the massive space station that had started it all. The Galactic Council chamber hung in space exactly as it had 7 years ago, but everything else had changed. Surrounding the station were hundreds of human ships, vessels from dozens of liberated species, and the scattered remnants of what had once been the most powerful military force in the galaxy. The alien fleets that had once dominated space now floated dead in the void, their crews either captured or fled to distant corners of the universe. "All ships report ready, Admiral," announced Captain Lavra Mitchell from the communications station. "The Council chamber is completely surrounded. They have nowhere to run." Sam nodded, looking at the tactical display that showed the complete picture. In just 2 years, humanity had systematically dismantled the military power of every species that had voted for Earth's enslavement. The Krillian Empire had fallen first, their rigid military doctrine no match for human adaptability. The Vorthan Confederation had lasted longer, but their insect-like hive mentality couldn't cope with the chaos that human tactics created. The Nexus Coalition had tried to negotiate early, offering to release their human slaves in exchange for peace. But humanity's response had been simple: there would be no partial justice. Every enslaved world would be free, or the war would continue. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Council chamber," Captain Mitchell reported. "It's Chancellor Vextar. He's requesting permission to speak with our leadership." Sam smiled grimly. "Put him through. But make sure he understands that he's speaking to the people he chose to enslave." The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of the Council chamber. It looked much the same as it had 7 years ago, but now only a few dozen aliens remained where once 847 species had sat in judgment. Many of the empty seats belonged to species that had joined the human liberation movement. Others represented civilizations that had simply ceased to exist after their enslaved populations rose up and destroyed them. Chancellor Vextar stood at the center of the chamber, his crystalline form noticeably dimmer than it had been during humanity's trial. Around him, the surviving representatives of the Galactic Council looked like defeated prisoners rather than the rulers of a galactic empire. "Admiral Parker," Vextar said, his musical voice now carrying notes of desperation. "On behalf of the remaining Council members, I request an audience with your leadership to discuss terms of surrender." Sam kept his expression neutral. "The human leadership is already here, Chancellor. I speak for the Human Liberation Fleet, and my authority comes directly from President Stevens and the Free Earth government." Vextar's form flickered with what might have been surprise. "You would have a military officer handle diplomatic negotiations? We would have the people you tried to enslave handle their own justice," Sam replied. "But if you prefer, I can arrange for you to speak with Commander Jake Sullivan. I believe you remember him." The reaction among the alien representatives was immediate. Several actually stepped backward. and Vextar's crystalline structure began to pulse with what looked like fear. Jake Sullivan had become something of a legend throughout the galaxy, the human diplomat who had warned them of exactly what would happen if they chose slavery over friendship. "That will not be necessary," Vextar said quickly. "We are prepared to discuss terms with you, Admiral Parker." "There are no terms to discuss," Sam said simply. "There is only surrender. Complete, unconditional surrender of all remaining Council forces, followed by immediate liberation of every enslaved population under your control." From somewhere in the chamber came a voice that Sam recognized. Whisper of Stars, the representative of the ethereal collective who had cast the only vote against enslaving humanity, stepped forward from the shadows. "Admiral Parker," the ethereal being said, its voice like wind through leaves, "my people have remained neutral in this conflict. As we voted against the original enslavement decree, we ask that you remember this when deciding our fate." Sam considered this for a moment. The ethereal collective had indeed been humanity's only ally in the original vote, and they had provided crucial intelligence to the liberation movement throughout the war. The ethereal collective will retain their independence and be offered full partnership in the new galactic order, Sam announced. All other species present participated in humanity's enslavement and will face the consequences. Vextar. Form began to pulse more rapidly. "Admiral, surely we can reach some accommodation. The Council made an error in judgment, but surely the deaths of billions of our people is sufficient punishment." "Billions?" Sam's voice grew cold. "You're worried about billions? Let me tell you what we found when we liberated your slave worlds." "Chancellor." The screen behind Sam lit up with images that made several of the alien representatives look away. Pictures of mass graves, work camps, and the systematic extermination of entire populations who had been deemed inefficient by their alien masters. "We found the remains of over 2 trillion sentient beings who died in your slave camps over the past few centuries," Sam continued. 2 trillion people who died because species like yours decided they were only useful as property. The chamber fell silent except for the sound of Vextar's crystalline form beginning to crack under stress. "We also found something else," Sam said, and his voice now carried a note of grim satisfaction. "We found records. Detailed records of every vote, every decision, every act of cruelty committed by the Galactic Council. We know exactly who is responsible for what." Sam gestured, and the tactical display changed to show a list of alien species and their crimes. Next to each name was a status report: extinct, enslaved, liberated, or fugitive. The Krillian Empire, extinct. Their homeworld was liberated by their own slave populations, who decided that their former masters deserved exactly the same mercy they had shown others. The Vorthan Confederation, enslaved. They now work in the same mines where they once forced others to labor. The Nexus Coalition, fugitive. Their leadership fled to the Outer Rim, where they're being hunted by the species they once oppressed. Each announcement hit the remaining council members like a physical blow. The galactic order they had known for millennia was not just ending, it was being completely reversed. "As for the rest of you," Sam continued, "you have exactly one choice: complete surrender and cooperation with the liberation of all remaining slave worlds. In exchange, your species will be allowed to exist under human supervision until such time as you prove you can be trusted with freedom again." "And if we refuse?" Vextar asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. Sam's smile was not pleasant. "Then you join the Krillians. Your enslaved populations have been waiting a long time for justice, Chancellor. I'm sure they would be happy to provide it personally." The threat was not empty. Across the galaxy, former slave species were taking control of their former masters' worlds. Some were showing mercy to aliens who had treated them well. Others were not so forgiving. The choice was clear: surrender to humanity and live under their protection, or face the justice of those they had oppressed. "We surrender," Vextar said, his voice barely audible. "The Galactic Council formally surrenders all military forces and territorial claims to the Human Liberation Fleet." The words echoed through the chamber and across the galaxy. The same space where humanity had been voted into slavery now witnessed the end of the alien empire that had enslaved them. Jake Sullivan's voice came over the communication system, speaking from the Liberation Fleet's flagship. "Chancellor Vextar, 7 years ago you told us that rights must be earned. You said our species was unworthy of self-governance." The camera focused on Vextar's crystalline form as Jake continued. "We've earned our rights, Chancellor. We've earned them with blood, sacrifice, and the determination to never again bow to those who think might makes right. The question now is whether your species can earn the right to exist in the galaxy we're building." As the formal surrender documents were signed and transmitted across the galaxy, the greatest empire in known history came to an end. In its place rose something new, a galactic confederation based not on subjugation and fear, but on cooperation and mutual respect. The species that had been voted into slavery had become the species that voted others into freedom, and across the galaxy, in schools where children from dozens of different species learned together, they would remember the lesson that the Galactic Council had learned too late. Never underestimate the power of those who have nothing left to lose and everything to fight for.